So which is correct? What is the true story? Why did the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago? Well, I believe the correct answer is, why did the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago? The full list of theories.
Mr. Reagan.
All right, now there's a lot of theories as to why the FBI actually raided Mar-a-Lago. I produced a video about this presenting my theory, but there's just so many theories I thought, I ought to make a video listing them so you guys can listen to all of them and decide for yourselves which theory sounds the best. So let's start with the official reason for the raid. The official story is that Trump was keeping at Mar-a-Lago classified documents that he shouldn't have, and that the FBI needed to raid the place with 30 or whatever agents with guns to take the documents by force.
We have learned that this is related to those missing documents.
Okay, no, that's a pretty vague reason to essentially ignore the civil rights of a former president, but that was the initial justification given for the raid. It was later reported that some of the classified documents were nuclear secrets or even the nuclear codes.
U.S. media is reporting agents may have been looking for documents related to nuclear weapons.
Originally, the nuclear codes thing was being talked about in Republican circles as a joke.
I was kidding the day that I said that about nuclear codes. That's not like you don't write them on a scrap of paper.
I do.
But Greg does.
Since the raid, it has been reported that the raid was actually conducted because Trump is suspected of violating the Espionage Act.
The FBI is investigating former President Trump for potentially violating the Espionage Act.
Yeah, Trump is guilty of committing espionage. He's stolen American secrets to sell to North Korea because he's short on cash. Is that it? But look, this is absurd. Why would Trump ever commit espionage on the United States? Now, of course, one can assume that the Democrats are still arguing that Putin is blackmailing Trump. They've been making that claim since the Russian collusion days.
What do the Russians have on Donald Trump? Politically, personally, or financially? What is Putin blackmailing President Trump with? Personally, politically, or financially? So again, I ask the question, what do the Russians have on Donald Trump? Politically, personally, or financially?
But of course, this is ridiculous. Everybody knows that the Russian collusion thing was a hoax. Nobody believes it anymore, not even Democrats. Why are you still talking about that? And if you think that what I'm saying is ridiculous, that the Democrats are not still pushing the Russian collusion hoax, let me just say this. I just posted yesterday a video of Peter Strzok on CNN making the case. He doesn't make it explicitly, he implies it, but he makes the case that the reason that Trump had classified documents in Mar-a-Lago was he was about to pass them off to Vladimir Putin. I am not joking. Watch this.
What troubles me the most about this case, I cannot understand why he maintained that material. The intelligence community struggled. They tried and struggled to get him to listen to the intelligence community. He was happy to listen to Vladimir Putin, but he had no appetite to sit and listen to what it was that folks within the intel community were trying to tell him. Now suddenly, he's out of office, and he suddenly pivots to take 27 boxes of classified material?
What a piece of shit. Democrats do not find evidence of a crime and then investigate. They invent a crime, and then they fabricate evidence in order to sell it. So these are the official excuses for this raid. Absolute nonsense. They're constantly telling you that this raid was necessary and Donald Trump is evil. And check this out. This is the Wikipedia page on this raid. When I copied this article down to post it here in this video, the raid wasn't yet a week old. And yet this massive Wikipedia article had already been created in order to justify the raid. But the truth is that the raid was not justified. And everybody who was involved in its planning and greenlighting needs to go to prison. But why was the FBI really instructed to raid Mar-a-Lago? There are a number of theories, and I think it's important that we list them, talk a little bit about them, and try to figure out which one is the real reason. So let's dive in one moment. First, of course, I have to sell you something. Now, Bank of America has just lowered its 2022 forecast for the S&P 500 by a whopping 900 points to 3,600, saying that we are headed for a recession this year. Shocker, I know. It said the new year-end target is the lowest on the street. This is not good news for those of you stuck in equities or anything tied to the stock market. Thousands of people have put their trust in Noble Gold to prevent losing money in the financial storm that is brewing, and you can join them by calling their expert team. Noble Gold was recently voted the #1 gold company in the country by Consumer Affairs. There's no call centers, no scripted response, no bull, just a straight, honest run through of your options so that you can decide. And by the way, they're giving away this beautiful gold 1/10 ounce American Eagle proof coin with every qualifying IRA or 401k rollover this month. You cannot go wrong with Noble Gold. Call the team now at 877-646-5347 to find out more, or visit noblegoldinvestments.com. That's noblegoldinvestments.com. Okay, so there are a number of theories as to the real reason behind the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago. Before we get into each theory here, I do want to say that each of these theories relies on an overarching belief that the FBI has been weaponized against political opponents, which is in itself an incredibly insidious form of corruption. Bizarrely, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, actually does not deny this. When she was asked if the administration is weaponizing the FBI against political opponents, she refused to say no.
Is this administration weaponizing the Justice Department and the FBI against political opponents?
Peter, the president believes in the rule of law. The president believes in the independence of the Department of Justice.
That's a yes or no?
No,
is
that
the
is
White House.
no. It's a yes or a no for you. I'm answering the question. You may not like it, but I'm answering the question, I'm answering the question, and I'm telling you that we are not going to comment on a criminal investigation.
All right, Politics 101. When a reporter asks you if you're corrupt, you say no. It's a simple monosyllabic word. It's not that difficult. Here, watch.
How about no?
Her reluctance to say no speaks volumes. Okay, now with that said, let's look into why the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago. First, the most obvious theory: evidence of incitement of insurrection. So the January 6th committee has conducted its investigation, aka witch hunt, and they don't seem to have successfully sold the American people on the lie that Donald Trump incited an insurrection. This is a slight problem because the entire point of letting protesters into the Capitol, the whole point of peppering the crowd with agitators, the whole point of improperly arresting, prosecuting, and convicting January 6 protesters, the whole point of the January 6 committee, and the whole point of the January 6 show trial hosted by Liz Cheney, the whole point of all of it was to sell the American people on the lie that Donald Trump violated a specific law against incitement of insurrection. And the whole point of selling that lie was that a very specific consequence of violating that law is that the violator is forever disqualified from being president. So the whole point of all of that was to stop Trump from running for president in 2024. Now, I don't think that they were particularly successful in selling the incitement of insurrection story. Conservatives all know that's an obvious lie. Some Democrat voters who hate Trump surely want to believe it, but at the end of the day, I don't think most independent voters are convinced. But even so, the Democrats may well be planning to go through with their ultimate plan, which is to arrest, prosecute, and convict Trump for incitement of insurrection, because doing so would prohibit him from becoming president again. Now, this would have to be a rigged show trial, of course, and I am going to do an entire video exploring that idea, so I don't want to get into it too much here, but it may be that they're still going to go through with this plan, and if so, they'll need as much evidence as they can in order to try to make the conviction believable. And so a lot of people believe, and I think sensibly, that those working to this end, they sent the FBI into Mar-a-Lago in order to try to find documents that can be in some way construed as to suggest that, yes, you see here, this proves that Donald Trump intentionally incited an insurrection. Now, I think that most of you watching understand full well that no such evidence really exists, but that's really irrelevant. It's not about finding real evidence. It's about finding stuff that they can pretend is evidence. Well, if you interpret this in a very specific way and distort its meaning, then you can kind of evidence of incitement of insurrection. I mean, this is precisely what they did in order to impeach Trump for the Ukraine phone call. Well, Trump asked the Ukrainian president to send him any evidence that he has of Biden's corruption, and also he talked to him about humanitarian aid all in the same phone call. Therefore, what Trump was really saying was, you'd better manufacture some fake evidence of Biden's corruption or else you won't be getting any humanitarian aid from us, Zelensky. Well, that's, of course, not what Trump said in that phone call. That was a complete distortion of what he said and really an utter fabrication. It was a lie. And if they're going to use the documents from the FBI raid to support a Donald Trump incitement of insurrection prosecution, well, they'll be doing exactly the same thing with those. Now, there's also the possibility that they know that they're not really going to find any documents with which they can effectively do this. And so the second theory out there is that the FBI was sent in just to plant evidence. Now, when we say plant evidence, I don't expect that they're actually going to be putting evidence into Trump's home and then photographing it in order to say, look, this document was here. I mean, that's not beyond the realm of possibilities. But no, what I mean about when I say this, it's just the idea that the raid and the subsequent collection of documents from Trump's home provides sinister actors an opportunity to then present basically anything they want as having been found at Mar-a-Lago. What have we got here? Okay, it looks like a handwritten note by Donald J. Trump. It reads, "I plan to incite an insurrection. Ha ha ha. Insurrection is misspelled. INS-erection." Now, this planting of evidence theory has been mocked by the left. The other night, Stephen Colbert mocked this on his so-called comedy show.
Since the FBI search on Monday, the former president's response has changed a little bit. It started out as nothing to see here, and quickly became anything you see was put here by the FBI. And all the former president's henchfolk have gobbled up the bait. You know when you accuse someone of planting evidence before they say that they even found anything? It's when you know they're gonna find something.
And he makes a lot of sense here, because it's not like the FBI would ever do anything corrupt, like, say, getting a bogus warrant to spy on Trump's presidential campaign or arresting January 6 protesters on bogus charges. No, the FBI would never do anything like that. So planting evidence, well, that's impossible. The only reason anyone would even suggest such a thing is if they knew that Trump was guilty. That's the only reason, because the FBI is perfect, right, Stephen Colbert? What an unfunny piece of shit. All right, now let's move on to theory number 3. This is my own theory, the stolen documents con. I made a whole video about this called The Real Reason the FBI Raided Mar-a-Lago. But basically, there's a law that says if you remove government documents, you are then prohibited from being president. I stand by this theory. I do think that there is a strong possibility that this theory is correct. Now, I actually thought that this theory would gain a little bit of traction after I posted the video, but to my disappointment, nobody else seems to have picked it up. No one. I mean, I thought I had a little bit of influence on the conservative political conversation in America. I definitely used to, but not anymore, apparently. Now, a few people have actually dismissed my theory because the relevant law doesn't actually apply to the president. And this is true. I actually talked about this in the video. But the people who have dismissed my theory, they don't understand the point that I was trying to make. I'm not suggesting that this could be an effective strategy to stop Trump from being president. I'm suggesting that those who came up with this plot thought it would be effective. That is, they did not realize that this statute doesn't apply to the president. They believed that it would. So they may have orchestrated this entire FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago on a misperception of this statute, believing that it would apply to Trump. And we know that at least one Democrat lawyer certainly did believe this. Hillary's lawyer, Mark Elias, he jubilantly tweeted about it. I mean, he was tweeting about this as if it was definitely going to happen. If you don't know, Mark Elias actually helped to create the phony Trump dossier and helped orchestrate the Russian collusion hoax. So, I mean, he is right in Hillary's inner circle, just the kind of guy who would know about sinister plots to try to take down Donald Trump. And in my previous video about this, I proposed the idea that perhaps this whole removal of records con might have been entirely his idea. And I still think that this is a strong possibility. Now, if you don't want to go back and watch that video, the gist of it is basically that at some point, a team of Democrat con artists, probably organized by Hillary Clinton, scoured the law books to find any laws, the violation of which disqualified the perpetrator from being president. And I just find it a little bit curious that both the incitement of insurrection law and the removal of documents law are both things that can disqualify somebody from being president. And these are both things that Trump is being erroneously accused of. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to see the pattern here. Okay, so let's move on to theory number 4, the general fishing expedition. So some conservatives have suggested that the FBI was sent in to look for anything that could be used against Donald Trump in any way at all in order to knock him out of the running for president in 2024. And that could be anything that might get him arrested or maybe even imprisoned, or it may even just be something salacious that could be used to blackmail him. Now, this is not unprecedented. The New York State Attorney General, Letitia James, was elected on a promise to investigate and prosecute Donald Trump without any reason to do so.
New York Attorney General Letitia James ending her campaign to be the state's next governor today, writing in a tweet, "I have come to the conclusion that I must continue my work as Attorney General. There are a number of important investigations and cases that are underway, and I intend to finish the job." One of those investigations involves former President Trump.
We learned today that she wants to depose former President Trump as part of her civil investigation into his namesake family real estate firm.
And I want the American people to know that the days of this administration are closely coming to an end.
The American criminal justice system is not show me the man and I'll show you the crime. There is a variety of laws against this kind of persecution and abuse in America. One of the primary reasons for the American Revolution was that the British colonists were not being given the same civil protections as British citizens in Britain. And yet a woman who campaigned purely on persecuting an American citizen was shamefully elected by New Yorkers. And so you see, it's not unthinkable that Democrats might persecute Donald Trump and violate his civil rights in order to try to find a way to hurt him. In fact, in my previous video on this FBI raid, I made clear the desperation of Democrats at this moment. And desperation makes people do crazy things. If you haven't seen that video, I actually highly recommend it. But anyway, this theory is that the FBI was sent into Mar-a-Lago to find anything that they could. A general fishing expedition. Theory number 5 is that the FBI was sent in to protect Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are currently entangled in a lawsuit around her concocting, plotting, and executing the Russian collusion hoax. And this lawsuit, as far as I can tell, looks pretty good for Donald Trump. But far more important is that a lot of what Hillary and other people did in order to develop and execute this hoax will be exposed by this lawsuit. And this, I think, is terrifying to Hillary. Many Americans already believe that she is a crook, and I suspect that she believes that this will convince the rest of the country that she's a crook too. And I think that she is justifiably worried about this because it is true. She is a crook. Furthermore, an FBI raid, if it was done to protect Hillary, could give her legal team an advantage in her lawsuit, preparing them for whatever it is that Trump is planning. It can also help with Hillary's public relations, giving her a chance to get in front of any story that might come out exposing her corruption. Theory number 6 is that the FBI was sent in to protect themselves. Hillary Clinton is not the only one who can be exposed by Trump's lawsuit. The FBI operation known as Crossfire Hurricane was an utterly corrupt operation to go after Donald Trump, and one would certainly expect that Trump has a lot of evidence against the FBI related to this operation. If, as president, he made copies of all the documents related to this operation, well, then the FBI would have had an interest in retrieving those documents. And even if they couldn't prevent Trump from making these documents public, then at the very least, it would allow them to, just like Hillary Clinton, get in front of any negative stories that might come out about them. Number 5 and number 6 are basically the same theory, but the motivation is different really only in terms of who they are going in to protect. Now, these are all the theories that I've heard about. If you know of another theory, if you've got one of your own, please put it in the comments below. But I'd also like to add a couple of ideas that I have about the raid that I've not heard anybody say yet, but that I think make some sense. First of all, revenge. Democrats hate Donald Trump. The FBI seems to hate Donald Trump. And Trump has hurt a lot of people by exposing their corruption. And so instead of protecting themselves or others, it is possible that the raid on Mar-a-Lago was just a form of payback. Maybe it was payback for some important person like Hillary or Pelosi, or maybe it was the FBI themselves that wanted payback. Chuck Schumer once remarked that if you go after the FBI, they have 6 ways from Sunday of getting back at you.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
What do you think the intelligence community would do if they were motivated?
I don't know, but from what I am told, they are very upset with how he has treated them and talked about them.
Was this one of those 6 ways to get back at Trump? Finally, this may have simply been another attempt to tarnish Trump's reputation. They did this with Roger Stone. They did this with Paul Manafort. They did this with Michael Flynn. And it worked. With these men, the Justice Department went after them and effectively tarnished each of them. When was the last time you heard from Roger Stone or Paul Manafort? Michael Flynn is the only one we hear from at all, and he's never interviewed by major media outlets. He's been relegated primarily to social media and maligned as a crazy conspiracy theorist. And so Democrats have some reason to believe that such a raid might actually fix the stench of criminality onto Donald Trump. But unfortunately for Democrats, this has not worked. Not only has it not worked, it's backfired. Every conservative opinion article I've read, every commentator I've watched on Fox or The Blaze or anywhere, they've all said the same thing. The FBI has galvanized the Republican Party with this raid. They have ensured a Trump nomination in 2024 and very likely ensured a Trump victory. So these are the theories about why the FBI really raided Mar-a-Lago. So which is correct? What is the true story? Why did the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago? Well, I believe the correct answer is D, all of the above. I think that there was probably an inciting reason that this raid was proposed, certainly one of the reasons that I've listed here, but that reason probably was not enough in itself to justify an illegal raid on the home of a former president. And I do believe that this raid was illegal, and I think that those who ordered it knew that it was illegal and they need to be prosecuted for it. However, despite any hesitance that might have existed to go forward with such a raid, the various other benefits of the raid were considered, probably everything I mentioned here. And after a bit of discussion and debate, obviously the warrant was sought and it was obtained. And the raid was, as we all know, executed. Whatever the case, this was an illegal raid. The official reasons for it are entirely phony, and everyone involved in its planning and greenlighting need to go to prison. Well, that's it for me. And remember, it's not that our liberal friends are ignorant, it's just that they're utterly corrupt. Good night.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism. And what is fascism? Private ownership, but total government control and regulation. Well, isn't this the liberal philosophy? The conservative, so-called, is the one that says less government. Get off my back, get out of my pocket, and let me have more control of my own destiny.